Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of BrainScratch. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for joining me here today. On this episode, we're looking to help another family in a terribly tough situation. But outside of that, it looks like law enforcement which has long held a position of not releasing much detail about this case at all, has done an about-face. And now there are new details that have been released. There is a new reward that has been issued, and they're being very open about they're asking for the public's help. We want to see if we can help them together here today on BrainScratch. But there's something else that I'm kind of troubled with in this case. There is what I consider a glaring omission in some of the information. We'll see if you guys notice what I'm talking about as we go through the articles together here. But let's go ahead and get started. This is the tragic story of the death of T.S. Thrasher. And let's start by learning from T.S., unfortunately, from his obituary. Thomas Stephen, or T.S. Thrasher Jr., age 29, blessed this world on July 5th, 1985, and was devastatingly taken from us on December 8th, 2014. T.S. spent his childhood and the majority of his adult life residing in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, developing a strong work ethic at the age of 12, as evidenced by his first job delivering 2 paper routes at the Oak Ridger. T.S. was the best brother in the whole world and was especially a champion for his sister Grace. He had a close and unique relationship with each of his brothers and sisters, and from what I understand, this is a large family. T.S. attended Oak Ridge High School and earned his diploma in 2003. He had just completed his final examinations at Pellissippi State University, majoring, ironically, in criminal justice. I don't know why, but we kind of see this a little bit as a trend on some of the cases here. He had completed all scholastic requirements and was to graduate in January 2015 with honors. He respected life and valued family. His beautiful smile, infectious laugh, and sense of humor were heartfelt and sincere. He was a gentleman of good character who has left a legacy of love for his daughters. We have been blessed to know him. He was currently employed at Advance Financial and recently received a promotion. He was totally prepared for the zombie apocalypse and was known to impersonate Michael Myers on Halloween. I've looked into his social media a little bit. He's someone a bit like me. He likes to go to conventions. Seems like he's into comic books. One of the costumes I saw him dress up as, actually one of them I believe was a zombie. Another costume was a disguise that Wolverine sometimes wears, where he's known as Patch. Just a guy that certainly loved popular culture, and in particular did like some of the kind of gorier stuff as well. T.S. is survived by his girls Caitlin Thrasher, age 5, and Addison Lint, age 7. His father, Thomas Stephen Thrasher Sr., and his father's wife, Ginny. Ietta Sue is his mother, and her last name is Messer. She's in Knoxville. And then, of course, multiple brothers and sisters. And once again, here's another picture of T.S. And that's one of the things that really just kind of hit me about this case. And it comes up for me in several cases, how a person's life all of a sudden gets boiled down to a series of pictures or small video clips, and that's what we have to hold on to. That's what his family has to hold on to at this point as they're searching for justice for him. So where is this happening? Let's learn a little bit about Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Oak Ridge is a city in Anderson and Roane counties in the eastern part of the U.S. state of Tennessee, about 25 miles west of downtown Knoxville. Oak Ridge's population was just under 30,000 at the 2010 census. Its nicknames include the Atomic City or the Secret City, and we're going to see why. Oak Ridge was established in 1942 as a production site for the Manhattan Project, the massive American, British, and Canadian operation that developed the atomic bomb. Scientific and technological development still plays a crucial role in the city's economy and culture in general. And in some of these pictures of the city of Oak Ridge, you can see these are, they look like campuses, like labs here. There's a few different pictures here of large development areas. But outside of that, also some beautiful scenery in this area as well. All right, starting at oakridgetoday.com. And I just want to give a shout out to the author here, John Hutari. He starts reporting on this case, and from what I understand, he's basically an independent kind of website news source. And we're going to see the information is lean at the beginning and then just completely shuts down. And John is one of the few people that keeps kind of tapping on law enforcement saying, hey, you know, the public is curious about this. I keep hearing from people. They want to know more about this case. You're going to see that trend through these. I just really appreciate that he kept a pulse on this as you're going to see the years kind of tick by. TBI investigating apartment death from December 2014. State authorities are investigating the death of a 29-year-old man in an Oak Ridge apartment. Oak Ridge police officers said Thomas Thrasher was dead when they arrived at a second-floor apartment at about 4:40 a.m. Monday. The Oak Ridge Police Department, which had responded to a report of a possible intruder, said the death was suspicious right off the bat. Michelle Owens, who lives on the ground floor below 615, said police knocked on her door at 6:30 a.m. Monday and asked her if she had heard any commotion. Owens said something woke up her father at about 4:40 a.m. Monday, but they didn't hear any unusual noises. We didn't hear anything, she said. With the timeframes that they're talking about here, I'm curious if her father was woken up by the police arriving. It just kind of seems, I mean, we've got the exact same time frame for when they actually arrive at the location that her father wakes up. Friend Josh Hamilton said he was in the same grade as Thrasher, also known as TS, and the two attended school together from Glenwood Elementary School to Oak Ridge High School. Thrasher was passionate, a very avid movie person, and loved comic books. He could describe a movie in such detail, you wouldn't even have to watch it, Hamilton said. He was a really nice guy. So this is a picture of the apartment, well, the particular building, I believe, that TS lived in. The structure, there's actually several buildings of that type in this area, but I just wanted to kind of pull up a map because if we are talking about a situation, home intrusion situation, I'm wondering about cameras. And admittedly, you know, we're looking, I don't know when the satellite view was taken, but we've got a gas station here right on the corner where if the person did drive out and made a left on Oak Ridge Turnpike, there's a chance they might be picked up by a camera there. We've got looks like a Mormon church here as well. I don't know if the mortuary would have, here's a Domino's Pizza. There's a shopping center down here. A couple of camera opportunities going off that direction. If they made a right on Oak Ridge Turnpike or came out on one of these other streets a little further down, it gets a little bit thinner in terms of businesses that might have cameras. And I'll just be upfront with you guys at this point. I have no idea if the investigation has any footage or cameras of any potential suspect vehicles or anything of that nature, because once again, they're being extremely tight-lipped when it comes to this investigation. If the person did make it to the corner of Oak Ridge Turnpike and kind of Illinois Avenue here, we get a much more significant, we've got a car dealership, we've got another church over here, but we've got a shopping mall, a bunch of businesses. So certainly some opportunity if we are looking at a home invasion, but based off that first article, we also have a really big question. We don't know what happened to TS other than his life was taken. We have no idea how. And also with the comments that we have from the neighbors, they didn't hear anything. So if we're thinking, you know, gunshot or something like that, was it muffled for some reason? How would you not wake your neighbors? I mean, look at this building. You've got a lot of neighbors connected in this building, possibly a neighbor above you and below you, and near to you on both sides. There's what it looks like at least 5 different families that could be living in an area close by, maybe even more if his apartment's kind of in the middle of this complex. It could be as much as 8 or 9. So how do we have the neighbors not hearing anything? I don't know, but of course we need to find out what is the weapon that's used here. Another article from Oak Ridge Today from December 11th, 2014. A criminal investigation is underway, Anderson County District Attorney General Dave Clark said. Now, I just want to point this out really early on. Do we hear DAs comment on cases? Yes. Typically, because I review a ton of news media on cases like this, that doesn't happen until charges are filed, about to be filed, somewhere very close to the court process. So to look at this case and realize within a matter of 3 days, we have the DA kind of becoming the public voice of the case from law enforcement's perspective, it's a little different from what I'm used to seeing. And personally, it makes me wonder if this was brought to the DA so quickly because the information is leading in a particular direction, or they feel like they're close to actually having this thing solved kind of early on. It's just what I'm wondering. I can't tell you that that's what's happening for a fact, but a little strange to see a DA kind of pop up on a story of this nature this early in the story. Clark said an autopsy has been performed by the Anderson County Medical Examiner. Quote, as a result of the circumstances, the Oak Ridge Police and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation have been conducting a criminal investigation, Clark said. There has been no arrest or charges filed at this time. So another kind of important indicator here, very quickly, the TBI is pulled in on this case as well. Clark said state law prevents the release of the details of the death investigation until it's over. Public help is needed to locate a suspect or a person of interest, or when an arrest is made. And that's, I'm trying to not read between the lines too hard when it comes to Dave Clark, but he really phrases things in particular ways and makes particular statements that just have me wondering about different possibilities. It seems like here the one I'm focused most on is public help is needed to locate a suspect or person of interest. Now, in a case like this, we don't know even the living conditions for what's going on with TS. Does he have roommates? We know that he has daughters. Do they live with him? Is there someone else? We've got a lot of kind of open-ended questions here. But it kind of seems obvious based on what Clark's putting out there, they don't really need the public's help at this point. And they're kind of saying, hey, look, you're not going to hear anything from us until we've got this thing pretty much wrapped up. It's kind of what this statement is saying. Or if we do decide that we need help in particular for finding a possible suspect. Quote, however, additional details will be made available upon completion of the investigation or in the event of an arrest, he said. So once again, he's just really stacking it all up for just like dealing with the public. Be ready to not hear anything about this case until we have it complete. Clark said Thrasher's wife, new information for us, Samantha Ann Thrasher, and 2 children, obviously his daughters, lived with Thomas Thrasher, also known as TS, at the sprawling Rolling Hills Apartments complex in Central Oak Ridge. Now, from what I understand, looking through some articles on this case, I believe one of the children is TS's biological child. The other child came in with Samantha into the relationship from a previous relationship. Despite that, and especially considering how the obituary is written, it sure seems like TS considered them both his daughter. And I can tell you, after looking at some of his social media, that seems kind of obvious. Seen pictures with a lot of love from that man for those children. Continuing with another article over at Oak Ridge Today, but we could see one of those gaps has just happened that I told you guys about. February 8th, 2016. Once again, shout out to John Hutari for sticking on this. TBI investigation of Oak Ridge apartment death still open, ongoing. Readers have periodically asked for updates on the investigation, and Oak Ridge Today followed up with TBI again. Quote, that investigation remains open and ongoing, TBI spokesperson Susan Nyland said. And that's about it. The rest of this article is all stuff that we've covered on the previous articles. Once again, just noting what Dave Clark said. Once again, noting that the original responding police officers considered it suspicious right from the get-go. Continuing over to WBIR.com. Father waits for justice. And this is from July 2nd. We've skipped another few years. July 2nd, 2018. When Steve Thrasher visits his son for his birthday this Thursday, remember TS's birthday is July 5th, it will be in an Anderson County graveyard. T.S. Thrasher was shot and killed while sleeping in his Oak Ridge apartment. So we're jumping years forward on this story, finally understanding some detail about what's going on here. Living in an apartment with his wife, 2 daughters, somehow he's shot and killed while sleeping in that apartment. And I just want to call back to what we heard from the neighbor, at least that one neighbor that was interviewed. Seems like they didn't hear anything. How did they not hear anything when you have a gunshot going off in an apartment complex like that? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but apartments that I've lived in, walls aren't always the thickest. Hearing neighbors, pretty usual occurrence, even just, having an argument or something of that nature. So to think that a gunshot happened in that apartment, and no one heard it, I don't know. I'm struggling with it. Quote, "I expected it to be solved a long time ago," Steve Thrasher said of his son's murder case. And Anderson County has a murderer running around out there that's so far outsmarted everybody. 3.5 years after the case, there has been no tangible progress for Thrasher's family. No one has been charged. "This has gone on way too long," his father said. "I've waited patiently. I believe in our justice system, but it's failing me." Thrasher planned to spend part of his son's birthday on the steps of the Anderson County Courthouse. He said he doesn't want anyone to forget his son and wants to see justice served. Thrasher said he will continue to seek justice for his son. "I'd like to be able to go to the cemetery with the only gift I can give him and say, 'Son, we didn't let them get away with it.'" Just really feel for Stephen and all this. And obviously, this is a man of his word. The next update we have is from the Oak Ridger. And keep in mind, TS used to deliver papers for the Oak Ridger. I believe his mother actually is also a former employee at the Oak Ridger. "Family of slain son take concerns to Anderson County Courthouse." And here we have a picture of Steve Thrasher and some friends of his that are there to help raise awareness for TS's case. And this is still in July 2018. "I've been tortured for 3 years," said Steve Thrasher, regarding the lack of information or charges in connection to his son's death. In an interview with the Oak Ridger, Thrasher offered $5,000 for anyone who finds evidence that identifies the murderer. However, he admitted he doesn't have that amount of money now. "I'll come up with it. Don't worry about it," the retiree said. My heart just broke when I heard that. And the first thing I thought of is, I got to do a fundraiser or something. I got to make sure that Steve knows that that 5,000's out there and it's fine. Thankfully, law enforcement has actually stepped up with a reward of their own, and they've actually upped it from there, but we'll get to that. Thrasher spoke about some accounts of the circumstances surrounding his son's murder, information other people have told him. He described these accounts as hearsay. "It isn't my job to solve this murder," said Thrasher, adding his role is to, quote, "get somebody off their dead butt to solve this case." Pretty obvious based on these quotes that at this time, Steve is having frustration with the investigation, probably a little bit of a tough relationship that's going on between him and law enforcement on this. And, if he's getting treated the same way kind of media is in terms of the information flow around this case, I don't think that's hard to understand. I would like to think he's probably being given some more information than media is, but obviously law enforcement has to be careful about that too, because we do see, particularly in cases where families get frustrated with the lack of information flowing out through media, all of a sudden they'll go and just start telling it themselves to the media. Do we have that happen here? Stay tuned. Thrasher said the TBI has taken over the investigation from the local police force. "Nothing's happened," said Steve Thrasher regarding the investigation. He said the TBI has told him nothing. "The big thing is us not knowing what's going on." If I had to make a list of the hardest things to hear from family members that I hear time and time again, that's it. Family members that reach out to their investigators, don't hear back from them, don't hear from them regularly. And on the flip side, we do hear about families that have good communication with their investigators and how much that means to them as well. I know I've talked about it on the case, so I won't drum it all up, but I almost wish there was a liaison role between the families and the investigators to make sure that contact keeps happening, make sure you could still protect the integrity of the investigation, but significant updates, or maybe pieces of those updates can come back to the family to let them know, yes, things are happening. We've interviewed 3 more people in the last month. Just simple updates that will kind of keep them in the loop on this, because it can't get easier as time goes on for these families. I mean, who would think that? And there's no time where I imagine a family's just going to say, okay, I'm just so frustrated by this whole thing, I'm just going to give it up. What you are going to have happen is family members get upset on his son's birthday when he should be spending all the time that he needs at his son's grave. He's splitting his time to go to the courthouse to honor his son by fighting for justice for him. Thrasher provided 2 signs for the protest, both with photos of his deceased son on them. He spoke to people going in and out of the courthouse, pleading his case. And by the way, if you are a family or know a family that's going through this, look at this case. Look at the Maya Miliete case. This works. Raising awareness in this way works. I think there's an aspect of it that's probably cathartic for the family, for them feeling like they're doing something to help with the case. But outside of that, law enforcement notices if you're carrying signs walking around in front of their courthouse, they certainly notice that. So sometimes, I know there's that old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but sometimes that's exactly what you have to do. Back over to Oak Ridge Today, an article from September 2019. Death of Thomas Thrasher still being investigated. John Hutari is not going to let this go. He checks in again. In response to questions, TBI spokesperson Leslie Earhart said she could not discuss any potential evidence in the case, including whether a suspect has been identified. And once again, all the other information in this article is stuff that John covered previously, but I really appreciate just this constant tap, this pulse, and it's also kind of leaving a little virtual record of what's going on during this investigation. But something else I wanted to call out here, anyone recognize that name? I believe she is the spokesperson that has also been the representative on the Summer Wells case. So admittedly, and it's interesting because in the Summer Wells case, I think they've been doing a pretty good job of doing regular updates, kind of appeasing media in terms of them speaking to them regularly, letting them know about, frustrations they're having with social media, but also letting them know about pieces they need. Like, for example, this week we talked about them looking for the maroon truck. So it's interesting to see the same person that, from my point of view, knows how to engage media and use it to help push a case forward. But for this particular case, they're just saying, hey, look, we can't talk about it. We can't even tell you if a suspect has been identified. Really, really just a very different approach that's going on with this case. And I'm telling you guys, the only thing that makes sense to me is they feel like they've got it so close that they've got the package all together, and there's just one little piece that's missing that they need to take that thing right into court. That's kind of what it seems like. Over to Oak Ridge Today again from April 2021. So now we're starting to get current. I told you guys, the information well was going to be a little dry in the early articles. We're going to start getting to more details here in these current ones. Governor authorizes $10,000 reward in Thomas Thrasher death investigation. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has authorized a $10,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of the person or people responsible for killing Thomas Stephen T.S. Thrasher in Oak Ridge on December 8th, 2014. 7th Judicial District Attorney General Dave Clark said, which I think he also got promoted, if I'm reading that right, over the course of this. The reward was requested by Clark. Thrasher was found dead in his home from a gunshot wound more than 6 years ago. Once again, we're not hearing anything about what type of weapon this is. We might get to a little detail on that. We are grateful to Governor Lee for agreeing to extend this offer of reward, Clark said in a press release. Cold cases like this one pose special challenges, but often the smallest amount of information may lead to a completed investigation and ultimately a conviction. In order to get justice for TS, I know the state of Tennessee would be happy to deliver a check to someone that can bring this matter to a conclusion. I am doing my best to try to not read between the lines too hard on this case, but it's really hard with a case that has such limited information. We frequently hear that, no tip is too small, no tip is too small. But here we got a couple of points Clark's making. Cold cases like this one pose special challenges. Here on the channel, we've talked about, homicides that happen within four walls can be extremely tough. Your opportunity for witnesses, much less. Your opportunity for cameras, much less. I believe that the nature of this type of homicide is already really tough. We haven't even heard any details in terms of, did they find signs of breaking and entering? Yes, we know the witnesses that they spoke to didn't hear anything in the apartments. Did anyone else see anything strange? Someone speeding away from the scene, something like that. None of those details are coming out here at all. I would like to think if they had details like that, especially seeing how the spokesperson for the TBI is working in the Summer Wells case, I would like to think we would hear some kind of, it was a white car that we're looking for that was taking off and it was going down this street at this particular time. Because that's kind of what we're seeing in Summer's case. We're not even getting that level of detail here. But back to his comments, he's really looking for, he's saying the smallest amount of information may lead to a completed investigation. And I do feel like they felt like it was almost a completed investigation very early on because of that period of time where they didn't ask for much help. Back to another quote from him. Our imperfect system of justice is designed to avoid convicting the innocent, but may sometimes generate complex and frustrating hurdles for victim families to overcome in their search for justice. There are restricting rules that only allow police and prosecutors to use certain types of evidence in court, but the smallest piece of seemingly unimportant information can sometimes tie an entire investigation and case together. We just need a little break on this case. I'm wondering if they have a bunch of social information that's pointing to a particular outcome, and here he's trying to say, we can't use that. I mean, we heard TS's father, Stephen, basically saying, hey, I'm hearing all this stuff, but it's just hearsay. And effectively here we have Dave Clark kind of giving the definition of hearsay in his actual comment on this case. So it seems like there's a lot of talk, but it also seems like they're willing to listen to it because they're looking for that talk that leads to the one tangible thing that validates that talk. And maybe that is what it takes for wrapping up this case at this point. Over at WVLT.TV, published June 10th, 2021. So not only do we have the reward offered, not only is there a new push of press, Dave Clark making new comments, there's also a video that is put out by the TBI. I really haven't seen them do anything like this before. It's a really well done video. I can't roll the whole thing for you guys here, but I'm going to have it in the description box down below. It's only a few minutes long. Please take a look at it. It's a really good example, I think, of what can be done by different law enforcement agencies. And outside of that, give you just a little bit more insight into this case and what's going on around it. But here is some of the high takeaways from it. According to officials, Thrasher's wife heard a loud noise that sounded like gunshots in the apartment around 4:30 a.m. that day and called police. When officers with the Oak Ridge Police Department arrived at the Rolling Hills apartment complex, they discovered the victim, T.S. Thrasher, dead from a gunshot wound. Police said neighbors did not report noticing anything suspicious or out of the ordinary at the time of the incident. Quote, I feel like it was definitely not a random act, said Special Agent John Hannon. I feel like the person responsible for T.S.'s death was somebody he knew, somebody that he was close to. I'm seeing possible contradictions in statements here already. Thrasher's wife effectively calling law enforcement because she heard loud noises that sounded like gunshots in the apartment. First of all, I'm wondering, okay, what's going on with the sleeping arrangement? Does one of them work at night? Like there's different considerations that my brain is just already trying to grab onto. And obviously we don't have enough information, but for her to hear gunshots, none of the neighbors to really report that they saw anything suspicious. We have the one neighbor that's quoted before saying she didn't hear anything. She apparently lived below the apartment. I'm kind concerned. I'm kind of concerned about what's going on with the conflicting statements there. And to Special Agent John Hannon's point, I just kind of want to run over to FBI.gov real quick and look at some of their stats from their UCR, or the Uniform Crime Reporting Program. So that program collects supplementary homicide data that provides the age, sex, race, and ethnicity of the murder victim and offender, the type of weapon used, the relationship of the victim to the offender, and the circumstance surrounding the incident. For 2019, most of the murder victims that they used in this data set were male, about 78.3% of them. And of course, we've talked about similar stats here before. More than 50% of all murders were single victim to single offender situations. So one-on-one encounters that wind up in a murder. Of the offenders of whom gender was known, 88% were male. So obviously not only the victims, close to 80% male, but the offenders, closer to 90% actually male. Handguns comprise 62.1% of the firearms used in murder and non-negligent manslaughter incidents in 2019. That's interesting to me because I've looked at stats on this before, and we could pull up the same kind of data from 2011, and here it was actually 72.5%. So handguns has gone down. However, the percentage for homicides involving the use of firearms has gone up. It was 67% back in 2011, and now it's 73%. So you're effectively saying there's more homicides by firearm, but less of them are handguns, which the only thing I could assume is that rifles, for some reason, are coming up more often. In 2019, 28.3% of homicide victims were killed by someone they knew other than family members, like an acquaintance, neighbor, friend, boyfriend, etc. 13% were slain by family members, and 9.9% were killed by strangers. So in a situation like this, you're thinking about someone being at home, being in their apartment, middle of the night, someone crawling in through your window and taking your life. In many cases is going to be someone that knows you. A total stranger doing that, it's going to be relatively low. I mean, we're talking 10%. Now, these numbers seem kind of off or wonky to me based on other stats that I've looked at before, and I think I know why. Here, they've actually kept its own category for the percent of murders where the relationship was unknown. Back in 2011, when they did this similar stat, I believe that they omitted that. They note it. They say that, yeah, we didn't know in 44% of these murders what the relationship was, but I think they actually cut that out of their overall percentages, because if you add up all these percentages, it doesn't make sense. It goes way over 100. Where if you add up these percentages, it makes more sense. You've got 23. Yeah, it pretty much exactly comes out to 100. So it's kind of weird, because if you cut out that 44% where they don't know, which you really should do for a sample set like that, I don't know why they presented the numbers like this in 2019. The percentage is more like 50% are killed by someone that they know, like an acquaintance, and then closer to 25% are actually killed by family members, which if you think that, half these numbers basically got chopped out because of this 48.9%, you basically double up these percentages and it gets much closer to the stats that we saw back in 2011. Another interesting stat from this, 43.2% of victims were murdered during arguments. And in terms of felony type murders, like a murder that occurs during another crime, such as robbery, burglary, like that's just a situation I think we should consider if someone's breaking into an apartment and killing somebody, that only accounted for 24.6%. So higher percentage chance that it would be something to happen during an argument rather than someone came in, they were trying to rob the apartment. But still 24.6%, 1 in 4 cases is going to be that outcome. Back to the information put out from the TBI and Special Agent John Hannon, quote, "No one had a bad thing to say about him. Everyone says he was the type of person who would give you the shirt off of his back. Friends stayed with him when they were struggling, whether that be with work or just didn't have money. He was the type of person that would just take folks in." Now, that I'm wondering about that being a potential risk factor as well. Yes, we do know that his wife and children are living at the apartment. I'm wondering, was anyone else part of this equation? Was there someone else that was allowed to stay there for that time because, they told him they were down on their luck, and something goes wrong, some type of argument breaks out, something along those lines. If there is another person that's part of this equation, I find it really interesting that they haven't released any of that information, in particular with this push from this year of information that comes out. It's like they're kind of touching on the situation about, yeah, he's the type of person that would bring people in, but they're really talking about that more in terms of his personality. I'm not really seeing anything where they're talking about that in terms of it being a risk factor. I would think if it was part of a risk factor, or if they're at this point where they're really looking for help, I think they might be clear that there was someone else that was part of this equation and we need help figuring out X, or we're looking for more information about this. Now, for an episode where I'm just struggling because of this looking between the lines on the information that's presented, finally we get to an article that is pretty straightforward about a few things over at WBIR.com from July 15th, 2021. A gunshot in the middle of the night. A man killed in his own home. A wife and 2 children spared injury. Anderson County District Attorney General Dave Clark is looking for that key evidence that will allow him to go forward with a murder charge. Somebody knows what happened, Clark said this week. There may be multiple people, and they're out there, and likely they have told other people. We need a break to bring this matter to a conclusion, the prosecutor said. Steve Thrasher's heart broke when the gunman killed his son. Quote, "So far, we don't have a confession from anybody. We don't have an eyewitness, and we don't have a murder weapon," he said. One of those 3 would be helpful. That's what really helps in getting someone convicted in a case such as this. WBIR tried to reach Thrasher's widow through her mother, but the mother declined comment and hung up abruptly. I know what a lot of you guys out there are thinking at this point. Is there some possibility that his wife might have been involved in some way? Why would the mother hang up like that? But also think about it from this angle. Someone comes into your home, murders your spouse. Are you going to put your face on the media, put your voice out there? I can't imagine a much more traumatic experience to go through. However, that's one of the considerations I've just been really struggling with looking through this whole case. I can tell you there's no information that I can see from law enforcement that's really pointing in that direction. Yeah, we had the special agent say that we think this is someone that he was close to. That's way, way closer. But is this a situation where maybe there was some form of love triangle? There's another person that's involved in some way that might be connected to her, something like that. I think it's something that if it wasn't for one particular thing, I might not even be considering a whole lot. But do you guys remember at the start of this episode when we looked at the obituary? Did you guys notice that it talks about his love for his daughters, family, and friends, but it doesn't mention his wife? Or did you notice that his headstone here, loving father, son, brother, but not husband? It's probably the biggest thing that I've been telling a story with limited information is one thing. Telling a story where there is this kind of strange, clear omission like this, it's probably been the thing I've been struggling with most in all this. And I'm trying to think of, is there some reasonable explanation? And admittedly, we're talking about a headstone. We're talking about an obituary. These are things that are really done by the family. It could be that there's some other story about a rift that had happened between the wife and the family that's not necessarily related to TS's death. I don't know. I tried to find out. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it. I even reached out to Steven. Unfortunately, didn't hear back from him. So I want to be extremely careful with this, and I want you guys to be careful with it too, because this isn't coming from law enforcement. No one's coming forward and saying, hey, we've got reason to be suspicious about Samantha in this. It's interesting to me that the news stories at the beginning, she kind of pops up a little bit in one and then just disappears. But of course, once again, to the point I made earlier, what if she didn't want to be in the media because she had safety concerns? There is a murderer that's still out there somewhere. But also keep in mind, there's 2 children that are part of this equation as well. And I don't know. It's just tough on so many fronts. And I hope, another heartbreaking aspect of cases that I look into is when families get split up, grandparents don't get to see grandchildren. I really hope we don't have all that happening in this case as well, but I don't know. And kind of based off what I'm seeing here, just with the headstone and the obituary, it throws it as a really big question towards me. Could it be that the family's suspicious of her in some way? It could be. It could be. Is it reasonable or not? We don't know. We don't have anywhere near the amount of information to make a good determination on that. It's an aspect of looking into this story. I don't know what it is in terms of an aspect of it in terms of the investigation, because they're not being that upfront about it. TS and his wife had a 5-year-old child together, and his wife had a daughter from a previous relationship, his father, Steve, said. Someone shot and killed him around 4:30 a.m., Steve Thrasher said. It's his understanding that his son was on the couch. So another detail we didn't have before, and a bunch of more questions. Why is he on the couch? Was there a disagreement? Was there some reason they weren't sleeping together? I don't know. Clark said he was prohibited from talking about evidence, including the kind of weapon that was used to kill Thrasher. So obviously Dave Clark isn't going to come out with that information, but Steve's been waiting for justice for a long time. Steve Thrasher said it's his understanding his son was killed by his own pistol and that the weapon has disappeared. This is really, it's just not good. It's not good. Quote, it would be reasonable to assume in an apartment complex, even in the early morning hours, that there are people out and about, Clark said. So generally speaking, you'd assume there were people who either did see or didn't see something that could be significant in a case. TS was the kind of kid parents wish for. He smiled a lot. He was loyal to his friends, and he looked out for siblings, especially a sister with Down syndrome in his very large family. Why anyone would want to kill him confounds his father. Clark said he's heard nothing disparaging or unflattering about the victim from TBI or Oak Ridge investigators. The prosecutor said he hopes publicity about Thrasher's homicide will encourage people who may have information to come forward. And I'll just be honest with you guys, this aspect of is this a domestic violence situation? Without it really being called out as such, just this kind of lingering question. Now we're looking at information about it might have been TS's own gun. The gun is missing. We already had the element of, neighbors saying that they didn't hear anything, but the wife said she was awoken by gunshots. It seems to me like there's something strange going on in interpersonal dynamics with this case. If it wasn't for this specific statement, Dave Clark is literally saying, we're trying to push the publicity. We're trying to get that information to come in so that they can use it. I don't know that I would have even made this episode. Really just struggling on all fronts with this. But back to it. Clark said, no detail is too slight. No recollection is minor. Somebody may have heard a suspect say something incriminating or revealing that could lead to charges, he said. We are really looking for anything someone may have that may have to do with this case, he said. We're at a juncture where a small piece of information can make a very big difference. Murder cases remain open forever, he said. Authorities won't ever close it until someone is charged. An apartment complex resident or visitor may have seen someone go in or leave TS's apartment that morning, Steve said. Whoever did this is TS's father talking, If they're afraid that I'm going to do something about it, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I will love you and forgive you, but I probably won't like you. I won't try to have anything done to you. I just want what my son has coming to him. He deserves justice. And I'm going to have a link to this down below, rosefuneraltn.com. It is a 12-minute video. I kind of talked about it early in this episode, to know that your life is boiled down to a series of photographs is really, really heartbreaking. But here is a video compilation that was made in honor of TS's memory. And for any of you that want to see it, I really encourage you guys to check it out as well. Thankfully, yes, tight-lipped in the beginning. Seems like there's a big about face, media push, new reward. On top of all that, over at tn.gov for the TBI's page here of cold cases, which one is front and center? First one in the list, TS Thrasher, with their new video that they've put together on this. Once again, just a reminder, please take a look at that. I found this really special post over at Facebook from Trav Wilder. He's a friend of TS's. We've kind of heard about this aspect of TS being a good friend and really being there to help other people. I think this is a pretty good way to honor that. So I just wanted to share this with you guys. Dear TS, my friend, my brother, where do I even begin? You meant so much to those who loved you, even up until the very end. We had so many late night talks. You always gave me the best advice. Whenever I asked you what you thought, you were never too busy to just listen to me vent. You put a roof over my head more times than I can count, even when everybody else had turned me out. And you had my back, and I had yours. You were my only support the day that I went to court. That day I went to court, and we won. This is very hard to accept, that you are really gone. I keep wanting to call you and tell you what's going on, but then I stop myself and I begin to cry because I know that you're gone. I promise you that you will never be forgotten, that I will tell your daughter how much you enjoyed being her father, how you worshiped the ground that her little feet walked up on. You couldn't wait to see her grow into the teenager that you would help mold. You often joked of how her uncles will follow her on her first date and sit in the back row. We would laugh at how she might get mad, but she wouldn't know. We only did it because we love her so much. You told me once that I was here for a reason, and it was a big one, because I had escaped this so many times. You said you could see me grabbing a bomb and running away from a crowd to save the ones that I love. I just shook my head and said, that sounds about right. As I stood there and cried at you in that casket, all I could think about is that should be me, not you, TS. I miss you so much, brother, and one day I will see you again. With love, your brother, Trav. It doesn't have to hit 7 years that this family has had no answers, that this family has been seeking justice. All it takes is for someone to be brave enough to pick up that phone. The contact information that you need is in the detail box below. We've even got a way to send in tips anonymously. Please use that information, put it into play, help this family in this situation. If you can't help directly in that way, you can still help. Share this with your friends and family, acquaintances, anyone that you know in Tennessee. We need to help raise exposure, help this big effort that TBI is putting out this year, kind of strike while the fire is hot and see if we can help this family with this case. Outside of that, giving an upvote helps. It gets this video ranked through YouTube's sometimes ridiculous algorithm. Once again, we need to raise exposure on all fronts. Please help us with that. I also want to once again thank Oak Ridge Today. Oak Ridge Today is an independent, locally owned website that covers news and events in and around Oak Ridge, Tennessee. It is owned by John Hutari. Thank you, John, for just keeping a tap on this case, reaching out to law enforcement, letting them know the community's not forgetting about it. Sometimes that plays such a big role. And knowing that you're an independently run website, I want to help in some way. They do accept donations here at Oak Ridge today. On behalf of myself and my amazing supporters through Patreon and PayPal, we're going to make a donation so that John can keep reporting on this case and many others well into the future and helping his community. Of course, I can't do donations like that without you. So a big thank you to all of the patrons and PayPal supporters out there, and a couple of new ones. Joining on Patreon, thank you, Heather. Thank you, Leslie B. And thank you, Sharon Calabresi. Really appreciate you. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordnarts.com, where you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or buy us a coffee like Karen recently did. We really appreciate your help as we look to help these families in these terrible, terrible situations. Can't do it without your support. Thank you guys so much. Take care. Have a nice weekend. I'll see you again on Monday with a brand new episode of Case Cracked right here on the Lord Narts channel.